Good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming. This is, for me, a particular pleasure to do this pre-concert talk as somebody who founded and sang for 25 years in a vocal ensemble not dissimilar, I have to say, from Gesualdo Six. It's fantastic to it's a privilege to sit here and talk to this man who's done the same with his group, and he directs it and founded it, and now he's producing some of the most beautiful singing. I have the privilege, as doing these, I can sneak in and listen to the rehearsal. And I listened for about 10 minutes. It was just staggering. It's the art of ensemble singing is something very, very special. And it almost has to be pointed out to you, because as with them, it doesn't look that difficult. And yet you know what's going on and how much thought and sensitivity, and it's just amazing. Owain Park, I'm delighted to have you come with us on the stage here and talk to everybody.
Good to be here.
Shall we talk first about the programme? Why The Wishing Tree? I know it's a Joby Talbot piece.
Yeah, it's a very exciting Joby Talbot piece. It's quite an evocative title as well, I think, for a programme. We perform a lot in churches up and down the country and indeed around the world. But in some places we go, places like this are more common. And they often want programmes which are more secular, rather than your sacred polyphony that sounds good in these cavernous cathedrals. And actually it works well because in here you can really hear the text, and to be able to hear all of the words, especially when we're singing in English in England, in a place like this, I think is really powerful, and we can tell a story with that. So the Wishing Tree kind of has the idea of the branches and sort of branching out into different composers and compositions and styles from around the world, but brought together by the poetry and the text.
So there is a thread then that runs through it.
There's a thread, yes.
Will you be leading us as we go in terms of
I'll do my best, yes. There are a couple of works that we come back to. So there's a few folk song arrangements. Vaughan Williams, Bushes and Briars, The Lark in the Clear Air, by James Whitbourne, who sadly passed away only last week. Yes. I think we knew it was coming, but still it's a shock to the choral world because he was such a generous soul and wrote some wonderful music. And that arrangement was composed for the Clarks at Magdalen College, Oxford. And we nicked it from them because we were working with them, and they started singing it, and we thought, oh, this sounds rather good. So we borrowed that piece, and that sort of magpie approach is a little bit how we find some of the music that we sing.
I think a fair amount of nicking from different groups. I don't see what's wrong with that.
It's what composers do, of course, a lot of the time. But why not learn from each other, and why not celebrate those groups and those singers that went before us, but also those that are doing it now? And everyone's got good ideas, and it's just about how you bring them together. And that's what we've tried to do tonight, is bring together pieces, as I mentioned, from around the world. So we've got a piece by Kristen Holmes, who's an American composer. Sarah Rimkus, also an American composer, but she was writing at that time at the University of Aberdeen. And she came down to Bristol, which is where I grew up, and she wrote us a piece, My Heart is Like a Singing Bird. And it's been with us now for 8 years, that piece, and we've taken it all around the world. And everyone loves it, and I love the fact that we were there for the genesis of that particular work. It's a really exciting thing as a group.
But also you've organised competitions, and you're doing a piece from, I think tonight, from one of the competition
winners.
The
winning piece, yeah. Alison Willis, The Wind's Warning, setting a text by Ivor Gurney, Bleak and Blustery. I remember singing that piece at Snape Malting's Concert Hall. I don't know if any of you have been there. Rather lovely venue. But at that time, it was one of the named storms. I can't remember, Gerald or something. And that was blowing a gale so strong that in this former Maltings, where the roof was, well, it's been put on, but I'm sure it could come off, we could hear the whistling of the wind at the same time as we were singing the piece. And you'll notice later that these sounds, we create them. But that was kind of spooky to be then surrounded by nature and the elements doing their thing alongside that piece. So it's quite serendipitous, really.
This wonderful concert hall is so well insulated. With any luck, you won't hear any noises.
I was going to say, yeah, we've really enjoyed rehearsing in here.
I think we're very proud of the acoustic in here. When you look around, it's blocks, but it's a special acoustic, and it suits not only 6 male voices together, but chamber orchestra, symphony orchestra.
Yeah.
So it's a very useful sort of acoustic.
It's rather nice to have this kind of versatile space.
Right.
When I was at university in Cambridge, and we just didn't have anywhere like it. I mean, we got West Road Concert Hall, where nobody enjoys singing there. Of course, you've got these nice college chapels, but when you come across somewhere that just works, it's so exciting.
Right.
And it should be kind of. I'm glad to see you all here, because it's the kind of place that should be cherished. And we have a bit of touring that we do in the US, and it reminds me a little bit of a concert hall they've just built in Brevard in North Carolina. And it's pretty good that you've got this on your doorstep here.
Yes, just up the road as far as we're concerned.
Yeah,
Marvelous.
quite.
I should tell you, which I only just noticed just before, this man was born the year I retired from the King's Singers. That was a bit of an opening, I must say. Yeah. But it's great because the King's Singers actually now, of course, are in their 56th year and still going on, which is really remarkable in terms of consort singers. Gesualdo absolutely in their prime and sailing along with all kinds of wonderfully exciting events going on, touring, tiring, exhausting. Yeah. You perhaps we used to do such long tours in order to make it pay, but it's all changed a lot now. You can probably do, 2 weeks or something like that?
Well, the market and the economy is certainly different. And I think that when you were going around the world, it was a slightly different time in terms of sort of how people made their money. Recordings was such a big thing. Yep. And you could sell loads of CDs, and actually every recording would pay for itself and more. Now it's not quite the same, and we tend to do sort of shorter touring patches, partly because we like being home, and it's a slightly different way of working. We also try to push what we do in the UK more, because there were groups that really sort of excel at travelling around the country. I think of the 16, for example, with their choral pilgrimage. That's something that we've really aspired to. But we know that, and we started by performing in much, much smaller venues. And some of you will have been to see us maybe at St Cuthbert's Church in Wells, which is beautiful, but it's not as large as the cathedral itself. Now we are getting into the cathedrals, which is quite good. And it's really fun to be doing that. And we can just about fill the space with the sound as well. Everyone has to listen quite carefully.
This, you'll find the sound, it just fills whatever space it's in. It's really remarkable.
It's remarkable, isn't it, how that works? And audiences play a big part in that. Because actually the listening ear and the way that everyone creates that focus is so important to that, because you can break it accidentally, of course. A phone goes off.
Yes, please note.
No, that wasn't a go.
No coughing, no phones.
Coughing, it happens, especially in winter. But it's just about if everyone's on the same page with it, and that's why live music is so exciting.
We used to think a lot about communicating with people out there. Yeah. That's something I couldn't tell from the rehearsal, but in principle, that's important.
That is something that we do. Here, it's interesting in here, because when we get onto the stage, later it'll be probably a little bit darker, so we can't so much see everyone's lovely faces. And we like to imagine that everyone is smiling back, rather than looking rather glum and thinking, what time is this going to stop? Yes, the communication's so important. Partly, I think, because we want to convey meaning in what we do, and for live music to be as exciting, if not more exciting, than recorded music, so that people come and hear us and we have that interaction. But also because as musicians on the stage, it's more enticing, it's more exciting to have that communication with each other, and to develop what we do with every piece that we sing.
Huge list of recordings now on their website you can read. Any live, or are they all recorded from sessions?
We did a lot of live recording with video, and that's kind of how we've done it. We're going to make CDs, which are proper kind of recordings done at the sort of darkest hours of the night in some backstreet church somewhere away from traffic. And then we do live videos like Ely Cathedral, that kind of thing, because it is different. And I always think that live is sort of better with pictures, because you're more sympathetic. Because actually, yes, you can do a live recording and it can be really, really good, but there's always little things that just happen. and someone just slightly runs out of breath on a phrase, and you think, oh, and there's no time to change it. It's live. Everyone gets it, but when you can see it as well, then you suddenly understand and you feel like you're part of it. So that's how we've done it today.
I think our 10th anniversary concert in the Royal Festival Hall in 1978 was recorded on 2 LPs.
Oh, yes.
But I think that if it had been video, we would have got away with some of the things that happened rather better than when it's absolute sound only. Yes. Analog sound, digital, because my earlier generation was all analog. Yeah. And I still think there's more atmosphere in the sound. I don't know what do you feel about that? Because you've been recording only digitally, haven't you?
We have, yeah. I mean, there was talk of us putting something out on vinyl soon, which would be quite fun. But in terms of the digital recording, I think what we can now do with people's sound systems, if you've got some high fidelity and that kind of thing, you can feel like you're absolutely there, right in the room. And I think that's really exciting, but it is a different thing. You're right. It doesn't necessarily sound so sort of warm and lovely and kind of. You can feel like it's at arm's length potentially, but it's still kind of your recording.
I remember we used to record for the German radio station. They used to come to England, and it was just at the time when CDs and digital recording was coming in, and we did a recording, I think Lassus or something, and he played us the result in analog and then in digital. Said, what do you think about that? And at the time, there seemed no doubt, as far as I was concerned, analog was, as you're saying, it had more atmosphere about it. But of course, it didn't last as well. It wasn't as mobile and one thing and another. But to go back to doing a vinyl recording would be great.
I think it would be quite fun, and I think that the album covers all look nice, all big and pretty.
Right.
As well.
Yes.
Well, there's a little bit of that as well. I'm not sure how they'll travel in suitcases, though. We might need to think about that.
That's a different. I was thinking about that today.
Yes.
We used to set off on a tour with massive suitcases. Yeah. You're probably. Oh no, you are using sheet music. You're not using iPads.
We are using. I mean, the King Singers now they use
all
iPads. Well, we can't afford them, of course.
Exactly.
But actually, no. We have talked about this, and we prefer using sheet music.
Sheet music, yes. Well, I actually do. But I'm from the practical point of view of touring.
Yes.
It must make a lot of difference. No, there are all kinds of differences like that. And when you're touring away and your family's at home, you can easily communicate with them, which I always think is one of the great advantages to a musician of the internet.
It really is, yeah. It has made, I mean, obviously I didn't tour in an age when you couldn't do that. But I do remember going away when I was younger on choir tours. We did a trip as the St Mary Redcliffe Church Choir down to Salisbury Cathedral. And I think it was, a couple of pounds for the payphone in the hotel.
Yep.
So I'm aware of the troubles.
Right.
But nowadays, yeah, of course, it is nice to feel that connection, and that does mean that I think that we stay in touch with everyone back home, and that creates a nice sort of familial
I think,
atmosphere.
because let's face it, it's hard work from the point of view of families.
Yeah.
And my long-suffering wife is here today. She put up with 3 months on a tour in Australia and New Zealand when our daughter was 1 year old. And all I could do was to record cassettes and send them by post. Think how long that took.
Wow, that's incredible.
I know, that was it was either that or you need a huge amount of money to use the paper.
Yeah.
So in a way, must have made the touring life easier and more, for nowadays.
For sure.
And the thing is that the voice has to be so, as a singer in an ensemble like this, there's no question of ringing up the agent and saying, I'm ill today, send my deputy or whatever. Can't do that. I wanted to ask you, Gesualdo Six, the same people from the beginning?
No. I mean, we've got 4 of the original members.
Oh, right. Okay, so some of these...
Well, because we started at university and it was kind of a bit of a, sort of scratch card lottery as to how it was all going to work, and it was just a group of friends. Then when Johnny, who was our bass, he left to join Voces 8 after a year because that was a big shiny job. I mean, you wouldn't turn that opportunity down, and I like to think that we made him who he was, but of course we didn't back then, and it was sad when he moved on and Hiroshi, our tenor, and that kind of thing. But it was never a sense of you must stay. Actually, we found that the people that we then auditioned and appointed were so invested in what we were doing that made more of a difference.
Yeah.
So we're not. It's fantastic to think that we started with a team, and that 4 of us are still doing it. But that's not the kind of the only thing that counts. Is actually how is everyone committed to the project, and what are they thinking about at the time?
And in a way, what a singer in Gesualdo Six needs is flexibility, that vocal flexibility.
Yeah.
I imagine listening to you, and that's sometimes difficult to find when people are auditioning. They come in all prepared and very good singers, but they don't adapt, and they're not.
No,
flexible.
and that's why auditions, you can't just do 10 minutes and hear a piece of Handel. That's lovely, but it's not this. And you can hear somebody sing an aria, but can they sing plain chant we did it in Paris 2 days ago. They turned all the lights off. And so we had to do it from memory. And it was a bit terrifying on the radio. But how do they cope in that situation? And so the audition process is longer. It's let's bring someone in, let's do some concerts, let's take them on tour with us, and let's see how they fit in. And that's why we don't have a turnover every 6 months, because it would just be impossible to maintain.
Mm-hmm. And you need a certain type of stamina, don't you? You've got to be able to, particularly, I was listening to Joseph, your
tenor, first tenor.
That is an extraordinary, it's such a high voice, and yet it's flexible.
Yep.
And of course your 2 countertenors, the ability to be able to pop notes out at all times of the day or night is very important, and a lot of singers can't do that. They have to have time to wind the system up and warm up and so on.
Yeah. You need dexterity, and also a willingness to kind of get it wrong sometimes, and to know that if you're at 95%, it's going to be pretty good, but occasionally, because we're putting our voices under quite a lot of pressure, because it's not just the performing but also the travelling and everything else that we do that goes into the job, that actually we try and give each other space and kind of understanding that we're aiming for absolute best. But when it doesn't quite happen, it's not because people aren't trying their best. It's actually just because that's the way voices work. It's not going to be perfect 100% of the time. And it's about how we interact with each other to make sure that sort of, the sort of spiritual well-being of the group is maintained. And so everyone's happy.
Tuning, intonation is related to that in a way, and sometimes it just will not happen for one reason or another.
Yeah, and often that's just because of where someone's voice is lying that day. They're thinking, I'm singing this note, but actually what they might be slightly under the weather, and then that does change, because it's a physical instrument. It's your whole body, and it's also the interaction with the space that you're in. So sometimes we turn up to venues, and the sound that you make, the acoustic that you get back, is just slightly flat or sharp. I mean, it's impossible then. And then what you have to do is just listen to each other and trust it. And it's a really different way of working.
And then you have an air conditioning sound which is on a sharp B flat, and you're trying to sing.
It's just the worst. Air conditioning is the death of singers. It's horrible. Every hotel in the US, endless air conditioning.
Yeah.
And you wake up dry as a bone. And the key thing about singing is hydration. And we've learned that recently. And obviously there are things that dehydrate you. And so we try our best to make sure we take on lots of water as we go around. And we, fly to the US, but then fly as little as possible after that. Get in the car and DIY, because again, it dries you out so much, and with the schedule that we've got, you want to be on your absolute best all the time. But
you'll get through the whole program without bottle on the stage, won't you?
We'll do our best today. Yeah.
Because that's become, now you see people all the time having to take, but I'm very impressed that...
The thing about that is, from my understanding of it, that immediate thing with having water now, it doesn't necessarily help, as time will demonstrate.
No, it will.
It doesn't help
Too late for me.
Exactly, in the moment. It's actually the preparation beforehand. So the night before, you need to be taking it on, and then you're hydrated for the next day. And then you can sort of top it up as you go. But actually that instant relief of a bit of water, I think, is a little bit more of a mental thing rather than actual, it's helping me in the moment. So that's something for singers to consider.
Right. I read that one of the favourite groups to come here is the Brodsky.
The Brodsky, we've worked with them.
You
Fantastic.
Worked with them, yes.
Yeah, we have.
What did you do?
We did a programme of Roxana Panufnik, John Tavener.
Oh, yes.
A little bit of Gesualdo.
Adapting pieces for...
Well, some of them were written for string quartet and groups like us. So we sort of adapted it to the point where it worked. And some of the pieces we kind of arranged so that it would be a very sort of sinewy program that would flow nicely. I think I remember playing some sort of percussion instrument from the back of the hall.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember why I was doing that. But that was a great concert. We have met up with them since. We haven't done another performance with them, but I'd love to do that. So maybe this would be an opportunity to come back. Yeah.
They came in just recently and did 8 Shostakovich quartets in one day.
Wow.
That was really a spectacular achievement. It's their 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
And Jacqueline Thomas, who's a cellist, spoke very movingly. How can it be a 50th anniversary when she looks quite young?
Yes.
And she said, well, because I was brought up in Middlesbrough, in northeast of England, where they had free instruments, free teaching, free this, free that. And everybody said, yes, what about that?
Brilliant.
And it was really moving, actually.
Yes.
Ligeti. Let's have a little chat about Ligeti, because
idea.
they're doing 3 movements from Nonsense Madrigals by Ligeti, which were written for the King Singers. And the last movement, which they're not doing this evening, but it was dedicated to me and Alistair Hume, who'd done the 25 years. It was our last piece, and we almost died. But they are marvelous pieces, and he was an amazing man to work with. I was so thrilled to see you're doing them.
They're terrific, and they're really hard.
Very hard.
Yeah.
I took a photograph, sorry.
No, you go.
I told Owain earlier that he gave us a laser print of the last movement, and I've got it in a frame on the wall at home. And you asked about how it looks, because now they're using the published copy, which is all printed out beautifully. And I'd taken a photograph. I was going to show you, but it's so small, I'll have to send it to you. But you can see how it works with squiggly lines, and somehow we did manage to read it. I don't really remember how, looking at it now.
Well, it looks hard enough on the modern notation as well.
But I think you were talking about it makes it more flexible, and you can get a more sense of...
Yeah, well, you can certainly see, I mean, any composer's hand is easiest, they are the person to decipher it, really.
Right.
And it's hard for us as performers to get into that. And I mean, that's why it's quite liberating to sing William Byrd from the part books, for example, because you get a sense of the contour and what the composer was thinking a bit more than you do in modern notation.
Do you sing Byrd from part books here?
Yeah,
do you?
Not today.
No, but you have done.
Yeah, absolutely. For our Secret Bird project, I mean, actually,
yes.
really, we've memorised that, so we're sort of pretending to read it, but we are also. It's also a good aid memoir in case anything goes wrong. And then I think that with the Ligeti, I mean, I'd love to see that. And you said you'd send me a photo.
I will, yeah.
I'd absolutely love to see in his hand what he was thinking at the time.
Unfortunately, the fact that it says for Simon Carrington, blah, blah, blah on the top has faded. Now you can't see it. But the music, the rest of it's fine. He must have added it at all or something.
Yes, exactly.
I will send it. He was very demanding to work for and yet utterly charming. And I always remember he wrote all the details with the dynamics and all that sort of thing. Yep. I had a little solo there where it said piano. And we were rehearsing away, and I sang at piano. He said, no, more. And says, piano, more. He shouted at us.
That's just like Arvo Pärt when we did Passio, and we did the whole piece all the way through, and he sat there for the whole rehearsal, and then came up on the stage. He was 80 at the time, and he bounds up onto the stage, youthful, and then proceeded to untie his shoelace incredibly slowly, and then said, all much slower. And then we had to rehearse the whole piece again.
That was it.
That was it.
These composers.
I
sometimes get ticked off for not asking if there's a question in the house. I remember somebody, if anybody has something, please do ask. This man is a fount of all knowledge, actually, when it comes to this sort of area.
I'm happy to improvise.
Any question regarding ensemble singing or anything of this sort? And you will talk to us anyway through the program.
I will. I mean, there's a lovely program with notes in there, so it's not a question of me sort of regurgitating those, but actually just trying to take everyone along with us in what our thinking is with the program and just punctuating it so your ears get a little rest from some of the singing. And we just sort of reset as we go. The program we did the other day in Paris was entirely different to this. It was only 2 days ago now, and it was music for Holy Week. So Tallis Lamentations, contemporary piece by Judith Bingham, Gesualdo Responsories. So we have had to quickly get out of that mindset and come here for something much more playful and energetic. So we really hope that comes across for you this evening.
I was very moved in the rehearsal. I was telling Owain, they're doing an arrangement by Gordon Langford, who wrote a lot of things for the King Sings, and this is The Oak and the Ash, which is maybe one of his most beautiful arrangements. It was very early on we recorded at the beginning, and it's rather sad for us, because the main baritone solo at the end was sung on recording by Anthony Holt, my colleague, and he just died 2 months ago. So it was very much in my mind, and I thought I'll myself dedicate. The way they sing it is so beautiful, and you see how his voicing is. It's the secret, isn't it? The way it's voiced.
Arranging it's its own art in composition, isn't it? And people have the gift to bring a melody into their kind of sound world in a way that both respects the original line, but also reinvents it in a way that people want to listen to again and again.
Right.
And that's when you know there's kind of genius with that arranging. Because I think anyone can kind of play a few chords and change a few things underneath the original melody as composers, but actually someone like Gordon had the ability to make them sing.
And the extraordinary thing was he was really a brass band man. He wrote lots
and lots of stuff. You can't tell in that arrangement.
You can't, no. It's fascinating, actually.
Yeah.
How people, what they craft. Well, of course, this man, you should speak about your compositions. He's very established now, writing a lot of music for all kinds of different ensembles.
Yep.
What are you working on at the moment?
Right now, I'm working on a piece for trumpet and organ.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, I know, which should be rather fun. That's for Matilda Lloyd, who we've worked with before as a group. She's a fantastic player. She's just been recording some concertos for Chandos over in Germany, and she's really going places, but she still comes back to work with us occasionally. And actually that's our next recording project called Radiant Dawn. So that features the James Macmillan piece that some of you may have sung, which itself is kind of loosely based on Onata Looks by Tallis, and that's where the disc starts. So we'll be recording that in May. But the piece that I'm writing for her, she's recording separately in July. So I need to get on with that, really. So I'll probably go and do a little bit before the concert, just to make sure. Yes. Keep it ticking over.
I meant to ask you how all of you, but particularly you, how you divide up your time, and how you must be a challenge.
Yeah, it's kind of always go at the moment. And I do a lot of work as a conductor with the BBC Singers.
And a number of other internationally around you.
Yes, and I work in Poland quite a lot as well, which is fantastic for food. Love food, brilliant. Beetroot for days. I've had it beetroot 12 ways, I think. It's a great place to work as a musician, and conducting ensembles whose first language isn't English. It's a really interesting challenge, because you then have to communicate through music and through gesture rather than through words. And that creates its own little sort of challenges, but also opportunities in rehearsal to create something that is kind of unspoken, but a real bond between performers and conductor. It's a really sort of enlivening process. Whereas, of course, you can just say, can you do that bit a bit louder? You can't do that. I mean, my Polish is terrible. So I can't communicate in that way. So we have to do it through gesture and through kind of focus in the eyes, really. It's a great way of working.
Yeah, fantastic. You promised us 30 minutes. We've had 30 minutes, Owain. You've been extremely generous with your time. And really, this has been an enormous thrill. And I think we should give him a jolly good
Thank you.
Okay.
See you in a minute.
Go and compose. Sit back, compose something.
I'll go and write something now, yeah.
Okay.
See you in a minute.
Yeah, thanks.